My mother abandoned me at 16 to give my room to my half-brothers. Years later, she showed up, demanding I pay for their college. But I called the police and got a restraining order they never saw coming. I'm 33 years old, work in upper management for a tech company, and make more money than I ever thought I'd have when I was a teenager. And the reason I'm telling this story now is because like 3 months ago, my mother, who I hadn't seen in years, showed up at my door, demanding money to pay for my half-sibling's college. I know. Sounds like something out of a bad movie. But I swear this happened to me and I'm still processing it, honestly. I guess I should start from the beginning. So, this makes sense. My name is Daniel, and my biological father, Anthony, left before I was born. So I basically grew up with just my mom, Deanne. She worked a lot, like 2 jobs most of the time, and we lived in a small apartment that smelled weird, but it was what we had. We weren't rich or anything, but we weren't doing that bad either. I mean, I had clothes and food and stuff. My mom was emotionally distant. We were never the type to hug or say I love you, but I thought that was just how she was, and whatever, you know? I never felt super loved, but I also didn't feel like she hated me or anything. Everything changed when I was like 11, and she met Brian. Brian was, I don't know how to describe him, like a very serious and cold guy who worked in construction or something. From day one, that guy looked at me like I was a piece of furniture in the living room. He was never openly mean to me at first, but he didn't make any effort to get to know me or talk to me beyond what was necessary. My mom was obsessed with him. Literal, I had never seen her that happy with anyone, and they got married super fast, like in less than a year. I was 11 when they met, and by the time I turned 12, they were already married, and my mom was pregnant with twins. When the twins were born, Connor and his sibling, it was like I stopped existing, and I'm not exaggerating to sound dramatic. It really was like that. Suddenly everything was about the babies, which I understand to a certain point because, well, they're babies and need attention, but it was more than that. It was like Brian finally had the family he wanted, and I just didn't fit into that picture. My mom started treating me differently too, like more impatient, more annoyed when I needed something. Brian never spoke to me, unless it was to tell me I was making noise or the babies were sleeping or some complaint. The next 4 years were basically like that. I tried to be invisible in my own house. I spent all my time in my room or at my paternal grandparents' house, George and Martha, who were always more affectionate to me than my mom ever was. They lived like 20 minutes away by bus, and I went often, especially on weekends. George taught me how to fix things in the garage, and Martha made me cookies and asked me about school. With them, I actually felt like part of a family, you know? But anyway, we get to the moment that basically defined my entire adult life. I was 16, in my second year of high school, and I came home one day after school and my mom and Brian were sitting at the kitchen table with these super serious faces. My mom told me to sit down, and I thought someone had died or something because of how they looked. And then Brian spoke first, which was already weird because that guy almost never spoke to me directly, and he told me they'd been thinking a lot about the family's financial situation. Diane interrupted and basically told me that things were tough financially, that the twins were growing up and needed more things, that the house was small, and that they'd decided I had to leave. Just like that. It wasn't like, hey, we need your help with expenses, or we're gonna have to make some changes. It was literal. You have to get out of this house. Brian added something about how I was almost an adult and could work and support myself, and that the twins deserved to have their own rooms and more attention. He said deserved, like I didn't deserve the same things, like because I was 16, I didn't need a home anymore. I just sat there unable to believe it. I tried to talk to my mom, like, are you really okay with this? And she just avoided looking me in the eyes and said it was best for everyone, that I was going to be fine, that I was a strong kid. Brian gave me like 3 weeks to find somewhere to stay, and after that my stuff was going to be outside. I remember going up to my room and sitting on the floor and just not being able to process what had just happened. My own mother was kicking me out of the house? To give my room to the twins? Seriously? I called George and Martha that same night crying. I couldn't even speak properly. I was so upset. George told me to pack my things and come to their house immediately, that I didn't have to wait the 3 weeks. I left 2 days later with 3 suitcases and a box of stuff. My mom wasn't even home when I left. She was with the twins at some school activity or something. Brian was there watching TV, and when he saw me leave, with my stuff, he just nodded and said something like, "Good luck." George and Martha gave me the guest room and told me I could stay as long as I needed. I ended up staying until I graduated high school and went to college. They were older. George was like 65 back then and Martha 63. And they lived off their pension, which wasn't much, so I knew I couldn't be a financial burden to them. I got a job at a coffee shop near their house like 2 weeks after moving in. I worked after school and on weekends. The money was little, but at least I could pay for my own things and give them something for food. I kept my grades decent in school despite everything. I don't know how, but I did. When it came time to apply to universities my senior year, I had to do it all alone. George and Martha helped with what they could, but neither of them had gone to college, so they didn't know much about the process. I applied to several state universities because I knew private ones were too expensive, and somehow I got into a decent university like 2 hours away. And here comes the part where my mom showed once again who she really was. I needed to fill out FAFSA forms for financial aid, and I needed my parents' tax information. I asked my mom for the documents and she said no, that she wasn't going to help me with anything regarding college. I explained to her that I just needed her information to fill out the form, that I wasn't asking her for money, and she told me something I'll never forget. She told me that I had decided to leave the house, that now I had to learn to live with the consequences, and that she needed to focus on her real children. Her real children. Like I wasn't her child, too. I tried to do the process without her information, but it was super complicated. And basically, I needed her to sign things, saying she didn't provide me financial support. She refused to do even that. I was desperate. Literal, I thought I wasn't going to be able to go to college, and then my Aunt Jennifer, my mom's sister, found out what was happening. Jennifer had always been closer to me than my own mother. She didn't have kids and always sent me birthday gifts and called me to see how I was doing. Jennifer came to George and Martha's house and told me she was going to co-sign my student loans and that she was going to help me with whatever she could. I cried like a baby that day. It was the first time in years that someone from my biological family, besides George and Martha, showed that they cared what happened to me. With Jennifer's help, I was able to fix the whole financial thing, and I went to college that fall. College was hard, in a completely different way, from everything I'd lived through before. Not only did I have to study and do homework like the other students, I also had to work to pay my expenses. I started working at the campus library and at a restaurant on weekends. I slept like 5 hours a night most of the time. There were days I only ate instant noodles or whatever. I could steal from the dining hall by putting food in my backpack. My roommates went out to parties and concerts, and I was working or studying. I'm not complaining, it's what I had to do, but it was exhausting. Jennifer visited me like once a month and always brought me food or left me some money, even though I told her she didn't have to. She insisted and said that's what family did, that my mom was wrong, and that she wanted to make sure I was okay. George and Martha also called me every week to see how I was. My mom, on the other hand, didn't call once in 4 years of college. Not once. Like I had stopped existing for her completely. I graduated when I was 22, with a degree in business administration. I didn't go to the graduation ceremony because I didn't really have anyone to go, and I didn't want to sit there alone watching everyone with their families. Jennifer got mad at me for that and told me she would have gone, but it was too late. I got a job at a tech company as an administrative assistant. The salary wasn't great, but it was a start. I shared an apartment with 3 people to be able to pay rent, and I was still living super tight financially because of the student loans I had to start paying. But I worked hard, very hard. I arrived early, stayed late, took any extra project I could. I learned everything I could about the industry and about how the company worked. After 2 years, they promoted me to coordinator, then to supervisor, then to manager. It wasn't overnight. It took me years of basically having no social life and dedicating myself to work, but by the time I was 30, I was in upper management and earning a salary that 16 years earlier, I couldn't have even imagined. I was able to pay off all my student loans when I was 28. I bought my own apartment, nothing super luxurious, but it was mine. When I was 29, for the first time in my life, I felt stable and secure. George and Martha were still my favorite people to the world. I visited them often and always tried to help them with whatever they needed. Jennifer was also still an important part of my life. We had dinner together like once a month. Now, here's where things get interesting. Jennifer is the typical person who goes to all family gatherings and keeps in touch with everyone, even though she kind of hates them, you know? She kept talking to my mom, even though their relationship was tense because of everything that had happened with me. Like 4 months ago, there was a family gathering for someone's birthday. I don't know whose. And Jennifer went. Apparently, someone asked about me, how I was doing and stuff, and Jennifer mentioned that I had just received another promotion and that I was doing very well in my career. My mom, Diane, was there, and apparently she got quiet when Jennifer said that, but then started asking questions. Where I worked, how much I made, if I owned a house. Jennifer told me later that she felt uncomfortable with the questions, but thought maybe my mom was finally getting interested in my life after so many years, so she told her some things. Big mistake. 2 weeks after that gathering, on a Saturday morning, there was a knock on my door. I opened, thinking it was an Amazon delivery or something, and there were Deanne and Brian standing at my door. I hadn't seen them in person in like 12 years, since before I went to college. I froze, not knowing what to do. Diane spoke first with this super fake smile and said, "Hi, Daniel. You look so good. We've missed not knowing about you so much." I asked them what they were doing there and how they'd gotten my address. Brian said Jennifer had given it to them, which I later confirmed was a lie. They probably followed her or something after they saw us together somewhere. I told them it wasn't a good time, and tried to close the door, but Diane put her foot to prevent it. She told me they needed to talk to me about something important. About the twins. I don't know why, but I let them in. I think part of me still had that stupid hope that maybe they were coming to apologize or try to fix things. They sat in my living room and spent like 5 minutes making super awkward small talk, commenting on my apartment and asking about my work. I just wanted them to get to the point, and finally, Diane did. She told me the twins, Connor and his sibling, had just finished high school and both had been accepted to universities, but they were expensive. That she and Brian didn't have the money to pay tuition, and they'd thought maybe I could help. Help. Like it was a voluntary option and not a disguised demand. I asked them how much we were talking about, and Brian said between both twins, they needed like $80,000 a year to cover tuition, housing, books, everything. I laughed. I couldn't help it. I laughed in their faces. I told them, "Let me see if I understand correctly. You kicked me out of my house when I was 16. You didn't help me with anything for my university. My own mother refused even to sign papers so I could get financial aid. You haven't talked to me in over a decade. And now you show up here expecting me to give you $80,000 a year for the twins? Seriously?" Deanne got all defensive and started with how I didn't understand how hard it had been for them, that they'd done the best they could, that the twins deserved to have the same opportunities I'd had. I told her I hadn't had any opportunities that they'd given me, that everything I had I'd earned myself without their help. Brian got angry and started saying I was selfish, that it was family, and that's how family worked, supporting each other. I told them to leave my house. Deanne started crying like dramatic tears, saying she couldn't believe her own son was so cruel and heartless. I told her that years ago I'd stopped being her son the moment she decided her other children deserved more than me. I told her to get out and not come back. Brian got up all angry and started yelling at me, calling me ungrateful and other things. I had to threaten to call the police for them to finally leave. I thought that would be the end of it, but oh no, that was just the beginning of the drama. 3 days later, I'm in my office working, and I get a call from reception saying I have a visitor. I wasn't expecting anyone, but I said, "Okay, let them through." And Diane shows up. At my workplace. She comes into my office crying and making a scene, saying out loud, "How can I live with myself knowing my siblings won't be able to go to college because of me?" My coworkers could obviously hear everything from their desks. I tried to calm her down and ask her to leave, but she refused. She said she wasn't going to leave until I agreed to help with the twins' college. I had to call security. 2 guards came and escorted her out while she yelled that I was a bad son and that I was going to regret it. It was humiliating. My boss later asked me if everything was okay, and I had to explain the whole situation to him. 2 weeks later, it happens again. This time, she shows up at my apartment again, knocking on the door like crazy at 10 p.m. I was watching Netflix and tried to ignore her, but she wouldn't stop knocking. My neighbors started peeking out to see what was happening. I finally opened the door and told her she had to leave, or I was going to call the police for real this time. Deanne tried to push past me to force her way in, and I pushed her back. Not hard, but enough to get her out of the doorway. She started screaming that I was assaulting her, that I was hurting her. 2 of my neighbors had already come out to see what was happening, and they saw everything. One of them, an older man, told Diane to calm down and leave. She ignored him and kept yelling. I took out my phone and called 911. The police arrived in like 10 minutes. By that time, Diane was sitting on the hallway floor, crying dramatically and saying I had attacked her. I explained the whole situation to the officers. My neighbors confirmed she was the one who'd been causing problems and that I'd only defended myself. The officers told her she had to leave or they were going to arrest her for disturbing the peace. She finally left, but not without first yelling at me that this wasn't over. The next day, I went to the police station and filed a formal report. The officer who helped me was super understanding and recommended I get a restraining order. He explained the process and helped me fill out the papers. A week later, I had the restraining order. Diane couldn't come within 200 meters of me, my home, or my work. George and Martha found out about all this through Jennifer and called me super worried. I told them everything that had happened and George was furious. He told me he was going to talk to Diane and tell her to stop bothering me. Martha said something I'll never forget. She said she'd always known Diane wasn't a good mother, but she never thought she'd go this far. George called Diane and basically told her that if she kept harassing me, he and Martha were going to cut all contact with her too. Diane apparently cried and tried to play the victim, but George didn't let himself be manipulated. Like 2 months passed where everything was relatively quiet. The restraining order apparently worked because Diane didn't show up again. I was starting to relax and think everything was finally over. And then I got an Instagram message from someone named Connor. It was one of the twins. He was like 18 at the time. The message said something like, "Hi Daniel, I know you probably don't want to know anything about us after everything that happened, but I wanted to contact you and tell you I didn't know anything about what Mom and Brian did to you when you were 16. I just found out the whole story and I'm in shock. I want you to know I don't support what she did, trying to force you to pay for our college. That's wrong. I don't expect anything from you, but I'd like to meet you someday if you want." I didn't respond immediately because I didn't know what to think. On one hand, this kid was my half-brother, and it wasn't his fault what our parents had done. On the other hand, I was tired of all the drama and didn't know if I wanted to open that door. I talked to Jennifer about it, and she told me to think about it carefully, but that Connor seemed to be a good kid from what she'd heard. After like a week, I responded. I told him I appreciated him reaching out and that I understood he had nothing to do with our parents' decisions. I told him I needed time, but that maybe at some point we could talk. He responded that he understood completely and there was no rush, that when I was ready, he'd be there. That was like a month ago. I still haven't decided if I want to have a relationship with Connor or not. Part of me is curious, like, he's my brother even though we only share one parent and never grew up together. Another part of me is tired and doesn't want to risk more drama. Jennifer says I should give him a chance, that it's not fair to punish him for what Diane did. George says to do what makes me comfortable and not to pressure myself. I gave Jennifer a gift a few weeks ago, like an expensive gift she'd never buy for herself, diamond earrings she'd been looking at in a store. When I gave them to her, I told her, "Thank you for being more of a mother to me than Deanne ever was." She cried and hugged me and told me I was like the son she never had. That moment meant more to me than anything Diane could say or do at this point. George and Martha are still my favorite people in the world. George is 82 now and Martha 80, and I see them every 2 weeks without fail. They saved me when I was 16 and had nowhere to go, and I'll never be able to repay them for what they did for me. I always tell them they're my real parents, and they get emotional every time I say it. As for Diane and Brian, from what Jennifer has told me, the twins are at state Universities with student loans like the ones I had. Diane apparently still tells the family I'm a bad son and that I abandoned her. But most of the family already knows the truth and doesn't believe her. George and Martha kept their word and cut contact with her completely. They haven't talked to her since I filed the restraining order. Sometimes I wonder what my life would have been like if my mom had been different, if she'd never kicked me out, if she'd supported me even a little. But then I think about everything I achieved on my own, how strong I had to become, and I realize I wouldn't change anything. Well, maybe I'd change the pain and shit I went through, but the results, who I am now, I wouldn't change that. I plan to respond to Connor soon, I think. I'm going to suggest we meet for coffee, something casual and no pressure. I don't know what's going to happen, but I guess it's okay to try to get to know him. It's not his fault he has Diane as a mother, just like it wasn't mine. And who knows, maybe we have something in common beyond sharing genes and a terrible mother.